Wendy here again, and today I'm going to talk about scraps. Yep, scraps. If you're a quilter, you know what I mean. By the time you're done with the project, you probably got a hefty pile of scraps, which is kind of what this is. This is a pile from my last quilt that I did, or at least most of it. And what I used to do was, I just kind of divide them up into colors and throw them in a bin, and then they sit there and, well, I don't know, they don't get used. Recently, after meeting some wonderful ladies from Sioux Falls at a quilt gathering that had been a member of, Pat suggested a way to better organize my scraps. And one of those things is when you get done with a project, get them trimmed up. Yep, so that's where we're going to start with number one. So I have quite a pile here. Okay, so this one, yep. This is a cutoff from when I quilted the quilt. So I have a long arm, and so after I'm done quilting, of course, you cut off and square things up. So it's going to be, okay, that's about that width, and then it gets thinner. Actually, that one's relatively kind of sort of the same size, but a lot of times there can be a pretty significant variance. And I should have ironed these before I got started. Iron your scraps before you quilt, before you cut. Yep, so you're going to want to iron them, but for this demonstration, I'm not going to. So we're going to, I've got a couple of these. Also, you'll notice we got a little bit of a curve thing going on. So what I do is, after I iron it, I lay it out and kind of look at it and go, I think if we start about there, I can get, a nice 3.5 inch strip from it. So about here, it starts deviating and getting smaller. I'm going to trim up that side. I got a little bin over there for my lefties. Trims off, and then I'm going to trim up the other side to get my 3.5. Yep. Ooh, just barely 3.5 there at the top. There we go. And now I have a nice 3.5 inch strip. So that's going to go in that pile. And let's see. If you're like me, a lot of times when you're doing a project, we do a lot of strip piecing. So you're going to end up with a lot of leftovers that are probably the same width. Now granted, sometimes they get a little curve in it. So what do we got here? We got, oh, look at there. That one's so nice. That's a 2.5 inch strip. I don't have to do anything with it. And I bet this, no, that one looks a little sad. That one looks a little sad. It's a tad more than 2.5, but it needs some straightening out. There's probably a leftover from something and didn't quite get done right. So, yep. So, as you can see, I just go through the pile, trim them up. And that goes in my 2.5 inch pile. Here's the thing though. Never, in my opinion, never cut down a piece of fabric into smaller sizes. Leave it the biggest size you can have it. And so, okay, triangles. I really don't do a lot with those as far as keeping triangles and stuff. So what I would do with this is I would go, what's the biggest square I can get out of there? Oh, look, I can get a 5.5 inch square out of that. Or a little more that way, and then I could get some squares here, some squares there. I bet I could get a 2.5 inch square out of there. And so, or, how wide could I get it? Vary. So depending on how you want to handle your triangle and what size squares you normally like to use, cut it up, but keep as big of squares as possible, or strips that you can. Because you can always cut down those strips, those squares, into smaller pieces if you need to. But it's a real bugger if all of a sudden you've cut things down and you realize, dang, I wish I had a little bit bigger piece. So that's what I do. So now you go, well, that's great. You do that at the end of projects, and then what? That's where the bin system comes in. So we have a bin of 1.5 inch pieces, mostly strips. I don't do a lot with that size. I definitely do not do anything smaller than 1.5 inch. But if this gets too big and I want to do something with it, I have a friend, Diane, who loves making quilts with little itty bitty pieces. So this could always be the Diane bin. And then we've got 2 inch, 2.5 inch. Those are kind of decent sizes that you would use. 2.5, obviously kind of full, mainly because my bindings I cut are 2.5. So when I have extra bindings, they go in there. Obviously, I don't trim them up. I don't do anything with them. Heck, I don't even iron them. It's there. Extra binding goes in the 2.5 inch bin. Also have quite a bit of 3 to 4.5 inch. So I might need to split this out into 2 bins. And then my final bin is basically anything more than 4 inches. There we have it. There's my bin system. The other thing is, anything that gets more than, up to you. Anything that's more than a 1/4 yard wide, so 9 inches, to me, I fold that up and I put that in with my normal pile of fabric that I have. I don't include that in my scraps because to me, that size, that's no longer a scrap. That could really be used for a decent size quilt if I needed a lot of things. So we have that. The other cool thing my friend Pat gave me is this pattern. I'll have to take a picture of it. I don't know if you can see it there or not. But what it is basically a scrappy quilt. This is the block. And basically I need 8 3.5 inch squares and 4 3.5 by 6.5 inch strips. So if I'm working on a lot, if you're doing a really big quilt and you have lots of leftovers, maybe you want to make a a quick baby quilt out of the same fabric. And you go, there we go. There's my quilt block. And you can be cutting those squares specifically for that. Or maybe that's what you usually do with your scraps or have a couple of patterns. And so cut them those sizes so you're all ready to go. And I'm guessing you've probably got some neat patterns that you use, that you like, or you can find on the internet that's exactly like this. Where it's, oh, I don't need to be fancy with my fabrics. I just need a 4, a 4, a 4, a 4 by 5, whatever to make a block. And then you're good to go. And so there you have it. So whenever you decide then that you're ready to go and start using some of your scraps, you have a plan. Maybe this is your plan and you want to do 1 block a week. Yep. Each Saturday, I'm going to come down here, I'm going to grab my scrap bins, and I'm going to put my blindfold on. I don't do that very well. I'm a little anal. That's a good word for it. Yep, particular. And so the whole just grabbing a scrap, can't do it, can't do it. Somebody suggested throw them all in a bag and just choose. I struggle with that, let me tell you. I have to be a little more organized. Speaking of bags though, something I forgot to mention is maybe you're a beginner quilter. Don't have a lot of extra leftover scraps and stuff, but you're thinking of something scrappy. Or maybe you're just somebody that goes to quilt retreats, because guess what? Not everybody makes the most of their leftovers, of their scraps, and they just go into the scrap bag, go in the garbage. When you're at a quilt retreat, a lot of that happens. So what I've done is every few days, they always tape a bag to the side of your quilting table, usually for you to put your scraps or an area where people are throwing them. I go around, I kind of scavenge it. Yep. So this, okay, that's mine. But clear at the bottom here. Look at that. Ooh, batiks. I'm in love with batiks. So this is a really cool way to get more scraps for your scrapped fund, and you're adding a collection of fabrics and colors that may not be something you traditionally work with. And it gives you a bigger variety. So that's kind of where this bag came from. So eventually I need to open that bag up and I need to get it trimmed up and get it in my own scrap bins so it's organized. But there you go, another way to get started with your scrap collection and make the most of all of that fabric you buy. Take care.